The Morgan three-wheeler. When you drive this around, people think you're a great guy. But underneath, you're seething with rage because you've come from a host of vehicles with touchscreens, haptic feedback, and a bunch of bullshit you don't want. So you've gone to the other extreme. This reminds me of when I pulled a double at IHOP and I came home to my ex-fiance who wanted to spend a day in the kayak on some shitty lake that smelled like a giant dump had been taken on me. That's what I feel like sitting in this Morgan three-wheeler most of the time. It's simple as hell, but there's no room. If you're over 250 pounds, your muffin top's gonna flab over or hang over the top of this sill, cook on the side of this exhaust pipe, and you'll be able to eat yourself for dinner. The rest of the interior space has a whole bunch of things that you've seen in Coachworks build or Handwork build from UK companies in the past. Removable steering wheels, so you can get your ass in here, or you feel like you're driving a race car, which this is not. It has a bespoke pedal box that comes out of almost a race application that you can adjust for your size. And guys like Jack, who wears a size 15 Velcro shoe, he has to take them off. It stinks in here, let's just put it that way. The gearbox comes out of an NC Miata 5-speed. That's about the most modern part of this car. Everything else is toggle switches, just basic instrumentation. So it doesn't distract you from what's around you or your impending death on the road, essentially. You know, if you're coming from a bunch of stuff and you want like that motorcycle experience out of a car, which is what this was trying to be, it strikes that chord of nostalgia and the simpler times from about 500 years ago. Let's head into the shop where Jack's gonna tell you all of the engineering that's in this wood barge.
In the shop with the Morgan three-wheeler. While this may look like it was built in Grandpa's barn in the 1930s, for the most part it was not. It's actually a modern vehicle, though it is still built by a small group of Englishmen in a shed. This vehicle was first unveiled in 2011, however the development project, dubbed P101, was started by the Morgan Company in 2009. Since then they've gone to sell about 2,500 of these things, which is a lot. Its production run went from 2012 to 2021, and it sadly was killed off due to emissions. However, they've since replaced this with a Super 3, which no longer has a V-twin. It has a 3-cylinder out of a Ford. So, as you can probably imagine, Morgan, being a very small company, did not provide us any technical information. In fact, Morgan is one of England's oldest automotive manufacturers. But I will do my best to walk you through this trike. So this is a 3-wheeled vehicle, and the body is a mix of wood, aluminum, and steel. The frame of this vehicle is a tube steel frame. It's somewhat rigid, and it has double wishbone front suspension. The rear is a trailing arm, and it has a belt drive. It's powered by a almost 2-liter S&S V-twin. So essentially, each cylinder is 1 liter. It makes 115 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque, which, as we're about to talk about, is a lot for this not all that rigid body. It puts its power down through a MX-5 or Miata 5-speed gearbox, probably out of the NC generation given when this started its life. It has manual brakes, albeit not a lot of braking power because there's very little mechanical grip. These front tires are about 4 inches wide and the rear is a 175 width, which is like a joke. You have almost no mechanical grip, which means this thing can be made to power slide all day long or understeer at a minute's notice. The steering, as you can imagine, is manual. While it does offer a ton of feedback, it is a very, very slow ratio, which means you do have a lot of wheel to be working with. When it comes to reliability, that torque issue or that torque number starts to become a problem. While it makes a big gob of torque in the beginning and doesn't really wind out, that torque actually starts to twist and vibrate this thing basically to pieces. The bolts that are not, let's call it core bolts, tend to back themselves out according to the owner. Everything is basically shaking itself to death. You can hear the fenders themselves over the front tires shaking. And if you lug this thing, say you're in second or third or fourth gear and you get on the gas and it's not in the power band, it will literally rip the compensator. There's a compensator between the gearbox and the motor apart, which causes a fairly expensive repair. And its overall reliability is exactly what you're expecting from a small English manufacturer. It will randomly throw check engine lights, and basically if you don't hear things vibrating themselves off this vehicle, you know something is horribly wrong. But with that, I think it's time for us to take this for a quick drive.
Jack, I haven't felt this unsafe since we were in that Jeep Compass.
Is that why you're wearing a helmet, Mark?
Yeah, and why you're fucking shoes down here.
Well, I don't really fit in this car. As you can see, we're literally spilling out of this thing, but you ready to feel some V-twin power?
Not really. It sounds like a 4-stroke go-kart at full tilt.
So Mark, this thing, as I talked about in the shop, makes a little over 100 horsepower, weighs like a little over 1,000 pounds, and it's got 3 wheels. It's made of wood, steel, and aluminum. You drove this earlier. What do you think?
It feels like you lost about 40 horsepower with 2 people in it. I mean, it's wildly entertaining, but at the same time, completely like, this is for a perfect day, no traffic. If I had to spend more than 20 minutes at a time in here, I would rather be in a hospital bed getting my asshole reamed out with a scope.
Yeah. So, you own an Ariel Atom.
Well, that feels like a BMW compared to this thing. This is like a canoe that you put wheels on it. I'm not kidding, really. I'm not even
And it doesn't turn at all.
It doesn't handle well.
No.
It's not fast.
No.
It doesn't stop. It's loud as hell and buzzy as hell, so what's the pros?
But it rides well, Mark.
It does. It does ride well. Like I said, it feels like you're on a little boat in a pond.
You always complain that cars are not analog feeling.
Oh God, here we go. I never said cars should feel like this.
But you're always complaining about touch screens and swipe to steer. There's so little front grip. I've never driven a car that at like 30 miles an hour, you can feel the front end start to wash out.
My 92 Trek has more front grip than this, dude. I mean, there's no tire under you, but that's part of the fun of this. You do feel everything. I wouldn't say in a good way, but this is like, to me, this is a car you joyride around with 40 years ago. Now when there's 6,000 pound SUVs and F-150s on every corner, I don't know, man. I feel like my nerves are at a 10 with this thing.
There is a level of like pure fear and danger. Oh my God.
This is what I'm talking about. This is like the general anxiety of driving this thing around. There's so much vibration in this thing.
You can literally watch this thing shake itself apart. Yeah, it's definitely one of the more entertaining vehicles I've driven, and I will say this, unlike a lot of the supercars we've driven or sports cars, people like you when you drive this thing, Mark.
It has a lot of character. It has a lot of, it's like really charming, and the fact that it looks like you're gonna have a good day driving this.
Yeah.
Why does the owner like it? That's what I want to know. What is his appeal to this?
So Joe, and I don't want to speak for him too much, he owned a couple Porsches before this, and I think what he enjoys about this is that it's very whimsical, and also, like what you complain about, you actually feel something when you drive this car. Admittedly, what you're feeling is very low limits and crazy NVH, but you really are connected with this thing, and it turns a 25 mile an hour corner into a harrowing experience, which does bring you some level of joy. If you go into this with zero expectations and you just want a big smile, it accomplishes that in a really, really amazing way. So Mark, with that, do you think it's time for us to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, let's do it, Jack.
Final thoughts on the Morgan three-wheeler. This is one of the best, worst cars in the world. Objectively, it's terrible. It doesn't stop, it doesn't turn. If you tried doing 150 miles an hour, which is its top speed, I'm sure you would die. Doing 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds is basically impossible and harrowing, and it literally shakes itself to death. Not to mention the fact that if you hit something, you are going to be atomized. Thank God it's made out of wood, so they can use it as a coffin when they lower you into the ground. That said, I don't give a shit. It is so joyful to drive, it makes up for all of its deficiencies. If you are in the right headspace and you get to experience this in the right weather, It is such a wonderful, joyous experience. You feel everything, you feel good about driving it, and the handling is actually a pro because it's comedy. You can experience all the Morgan has to offer under 40 miles an hour. Not to mention the fact that when you drive this thing, people like you. You can literally roll past people in traffic and they will have the biggest, dumbest smile on their face. When you are sitting in gridlock, yes, you are cooking in this little wooden box, but the people around you are happy to see you. You have improved their day in a way that basically no car in the world can do, which is a superpower that the Morgan possesses. What about the car? Well, it's expensive. In the used market, it's $40,000 to $65,000, and it's not a vehicle you can use a lot often. But if you can live with its deficiencies and you like what it has to offer, I definitely think this is something you should add to your garage. So with that, thanks for watching and I hope to see you soon.